Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us again. It's a pleasure to have you. My name is Patty Adams, and I'm the CEO and founder of Scars of the Past Ministry, which is a nonprofit organization that supports sexual assault survivors using a holistic approach. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and this April 2024, we would be doing some segments centered around the theme of building connected communities. This theme was developed by the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, and it's all about bringing communities together to see what we can do to support the sexual assault survivors. Today, I have a very esteemed guest with me by the name of Misty Craver. She is with the Victims Assistance Center, and she is the Victims Assistance Center Program Director. Please stick by, stand by, tune in, and let's hear what Miss Misty has to say. Hi, Misty. How are you doing today?
Hey, good. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for joining us. And so I understand that you work with the Victims Assistance Center as the program director. Will you tell me a little bit about what you do in that position and how long you've been in that position?
So I've been, it's kind of I have a long backstory with the Jefferson County Victims Assistance Center. I actually have been here. This is my third time here total. So when I was in college, I went to Lamar, and when I was getting my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's, I did volunteer work here. This was one of the places that was listed for social workers to
Yes.
come and do volunteer work. So I was here, did about 50 hours, really enjoyed the work that they did.
Mhm.
Um, then when I went to before when I graduated, before I went to graduate school
Mhm.
in St. Louis, there was a job opening here for a hotline assessment person, and so I came and did that for a few months. Like I graduated in August from undergrad, and I was leaving for graduate school in January. So I was here for that period of time
Okay.
and enjoyed it then too.
Yes.
So when I got finished with graduate school in 2001, I called them and said, "Hey, y'all got anything open here?" I said, "You got any or anything else in the area of victims assistance?"
Yes.
And they had an opening, and so I came back here, and I've never left. So most of my professional
Yes.
most of my professional life has been working with victims of crime in one way or another.
Well, you
And
sound very passionate about it. And so
uh,
where do you think that passion comes from?
Well, I'm not really sure because a lot of times victims assistants, people who are involved in dealing with crime victims, find their path through some kind of victimization or a victimization in their family or something like that. And I don't have any experience like that. I just it's one of those things where when I am talking to victims of crime, I think they feel it and I feel it. It's like I'm talking to my people, and
Yes.
we we see eye to eye. We can work together to not only kind of get the services they need, but also find that empowerment that survivors need through this system, through the criminal justice system. And I guess that's what I do. That's my effort. That's the effort of the whole agency, if I had to narrow it down.
Right. Well, thank you. I myself, unfortunately, have been assaulted 4 times, sexually
Yeah.
assaulted in my life. And, I just feel it's God that I was protected during those incidents that I actually made it through because some of them did involve weapons and things of that nature. So for me, my passion came for starting Scars of the Past, which I talked to you about briefly, was because I didn't want anyone to have to go through what I went through. And if they did
Right.
go through it, I wanted them to know that there's someone here who can actually relate to what they're doing, that it would be more than
Absolutely.
empathy and sympathy. But I have to tell you, I'm so appreciative that there are people like yourself that have not been victimized in that way,
Um,
that still have such a passion to say, but you
yeah.
know what? I just want to be able to help. And so tip off my hat. I don't have a hat on, but hope you can see me
Well,
tipping that hat to
well,
you.
that's the exact same way I feel about survivors who find themselves in the helping profession as well. I feel like people like me and people like you work through this thing and do this together. I feel like without your input, without people's input of people who have been victimized, keeping us on the right track, moving us through the criminal justice system to let us know what victims need, then you have nothing. That's the way this whole profession has built itself. The whole profession of victims assistance has been built on victims speaking up and saying this is what we need. So
Right.
without that, I feel like I don't feel like you have victims assistants. So
That's true,
yeah.
100%. And I was looking at the website and it showed several different services. And so what I want to do in this interview today is pretty much just talk about each one of those. Now, I know it's kind of a long list, so you can spend maybe 2 minutes just giving us an overview. But the reason for that is I want the audience, when they're listening, to know, okay, this is what this means when we say this, whatever
Right.
it is. And so we're going to start with Texas crime victims' right. What exactly is the right of a crime victim?
So it might be helpful for me to give you a little bit of background
Yes,
information about kind of how our agency started.
please.
So, so our center was opened. The Jefferson County Victims Assistance Center opened in 1991, and it was the result of victims' rights and task forces in the area
Mhm.
targeted toward what victims' rights were. Before that, everybody's heard of like things like offenders' rights, a Miranda warning,
Yes,
and all of that kind of
yes.
stuff. Prior to the 90s, when the Crime Victims Bill of Rights was written into law, there wasn't anything written in for crime victims. There wasn't anything that they had by law that was to be afforded to them.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So our center opened as a kind of a byproduct of that movement. Okay.
Hmm.
When
Yes.
we opened, we were considered we were mainly a domestic violence resource center,
Hmm.
focused solely on kind of being a one-stop shop for domestic violence related services.
Yes.
So most people know us as that kind of agency.
Hmm.
Most people have us as because that's where our roots are. But over the years, when that movement progressed more for victims and people started paying more attention to the
Hmm.
fact that victims of all violent crime were falling through the cracks of the system, then
Yes.
there was a push for our agency to also branch out and become
Yeah.
what's called a crime victim clearinghouse.
To do
So
more.
exactly, do
Okay.
services for all victims of
Hmm.
violent crime.
Hmm.
And so that effort, as far as crime victims' rights,
Hmm.
crime victims have the right to things like protections in the system. They have a right to notifications and information. They have a right to be told things verbally and written. There's all kinds of rights that crime victims have. I think by law there's 13 written in to the Code of Criminal Procedures for what victims have rights to. But without an agency or people that are making sure that those rights are afforded to them and making sure that they know it, then you don't really, you can't get them to them. Some of those rights are things like rights to stuff like crime victims compensation, which I'm sure we're going to end up talking about,
Yes.
while we're here. But they have all kinds of rights through the system.
So are those rights public record? Like, I could just go out to Google and say, hey, what's my crime victims' right? Or is that something I have to come by the
Absolutely.
office and you hand me a brochure?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, if you look on any website and look up Texas Crime Victim Bill of Rights, it'll list them out for you. And the way it lists them out is, of course, like the code
Yes.
reads, the
Yes.
Code of Criminal Procedure, so it's
Yes.
kind of complex. There's a
Correct.
whole lot of places that will have it broken down into common speak, to
So
where
it's
you
not
can
all
keep
legislators and sections and articles and all
exactly.
that stuff that would be like, way, that's way too much for me to process.
Exactly, but they're all built around things like notification,
Yes.
and so victims being able to know what's coming up in the criminal justice system or how that system works, or they're built around protections from law enforcement, DA's office, anybody in the system. That's kind of how they're all, and every right is built on those main core values that victims have been shown to need that have been
Yes.
overlooked in the system.
And thank you for that. That was a great
Yeah,
overview because, as a victim, when you're actually going through that, your mind is already just like overwhelmed with so much stuff. And it's so nice to be able to have a resource to where you can tell a
yes,
person, hey, this is what you need. Go here or go there or do this or do that so they can get the help that they need. And you did
right.
talk about crimes victims compensation, which is
Yeah,
coming up next, because I
yeah.
want you to kind of explain what kind of compensation or funds are out there for victims, and then what
Okay.
do they have to do in order to qualify for those funds?
Okay. So what crime victims compensation is it's a program run through the Attorney General's office for the state of Texas.
Mhm.
And if a person is a victim of crime in the state, or they can be a resident of the state of Texas and victimized in another state, all right. But if they are a victim of crime in the state of Texas and they report that crime and
Mhm.
are actively participating and cooperating with the prosecution and investigation and all that stuff of that crime,
Mhm.
those are the elements. That's what a person has to have, okay?
Okay,
If they
okay.
have those elements, they have a case number, could be a law enforcement case number, could be a CPS report number, whatever it is. If they're involved in the system and they've got a report and they're actively working with agencies to try to ensure that the prosecution or investigation in that case gets taken care of, then that's the elements. That's what they have to have. Okay.
Okay, and go ahead.
So once they have those elements, then they just have to apply. The application process can start any number of ways. Of course, we offer applications and assistance with applications here. There's other agencies in the area that offer assistance and applications depending on what type of victimization is involved. They've got a website that you can get applications online, fill them out online and submit online.
That's the way of the world right now.
Yes, all kinds of options available. The only thing I would say about online submittal of applications is there's certain agencies like ours and others in the area that are considered both priority processing agencies and agencies for presumptive eligibility, which means that in some of those ways it moves faster. You even get to skip a step sometimes if
Okay.
it's submitted by an agency. So if you sat down at your computer and filled one out and submitted it to Crime Victims Compensation in Austin, they might not even look at it for a period of time. You know, it might be a while, and it's already kind of slow, you know. So
Yeah, but that's
but if
common for a lot of counties that they get backlogged in that area because they don't have the
yeah,
staffing to support being able to
right.
process those applications. Would that be correct?
Yes, yes. The Crime Victims Compensation Program in Austin, first of all, they receive, I couldn't even tell you how many applications they receive to go through, that they have to filter through all of these sections. So like presumptive eligibility, for example, if they receive an application from our office or one that has presumptive eligibility, then they know that we've already looked at it for the general criteria. So it's like it skips
Gives
some
you
of
a
the
step
filter.
forward.
Yeah, we also send it because we have authority, because we're a division of the district attorney's office. We
Yes.
also have authority to get the offense reports. And so we can send those offense reports with the application. That skips another step.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. And
makes
then
things a lot quicker.
this may be off topic, but maybe not. Is witness protection program handled through that as well? Like if a person need to be relocated because of the crime itself, would that be handled through the same process?
Probably not through crime victims, like probably not through the Attorney General's office, but through federal state things. Like
Okay.
that's kind of where that's taken care of. And usually we'll start with our local law enforcement, move to like DPS, figure out where our best case scenario is for getting
Yes.
protection, like witness protection for that crime victim. Most of the types of protection that we're doing on the county level is like protective order type protection. You know, not
Understood.
necessarily moving you out of the area or hiding your identity, but helping with orders of protection, stay away orders and stuff like that.
Very good. Very well explained. Oh, this is going good. Good. Because I'm trying not to keep you too long, and so I'm conscious of your time. So the
You're
next one on
fine.
there is the criminal justice system. Tell me a little bit about what is the criminal justice system and how it works to support victims.
So, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to
Okay.
the criminal justice system, I would say in general, is probably not built up to support victims. I don't think that's its natural bend. Okay. So I think what we have to do, I think what we're trying to do at agencies like this and people in the community is to take that criminal justice system and make sure that that victim doesn't get lost in it. So there's so many requirements, so many things that we have expectations that a victim is going to be able to do in order to stay involved with this process. Okay. Not only do they have to make the report and continue following up, but they've got to stay engaged in the process for what ends up being, unfortunately, a year, 2 years. I mean, you see a lot of times it's a long time for a case to reach its culmination with whatever that is, whether it's a trial or a plea bargain, whatever it is, it takes a while to get there.
And even more so now with COVID, everything's
Yes, everything's backlogged. So trying to keep a victim engaged in that criminal justice process, that criminal justice process is not built for that. It's not built for that kind of engagement for crime victims. So I think that's the whole goal of what we're trying to do, is act as a liaison between that victim and the criminal justice system to ensure that they don't get lost, to ensure that they stay engaged, to ensure that when they get discouraged by resets or things that don't go their way, through the justice system, that they understand what their rights are, okay, and that they know that they can be a part of that, that they are the expert, even though all these people in the criminal justice system, like our agency, law enforcement, judges, prosecutors, they all choose to be a part of that system.
Right.
Victims are thrown into that system
Yes.
unexpectedly,
Yes.
but then expected to perform perfectly throughout the process. So that's part of, I think that's probably what I'm most passionate about in dealing with victims, is keeping them engaged in that system to ensure the end goal that everybody has, right, is to make sure that offenders are held accountable for their actions. But so
Right.
many times we're trying to do that without the participation and cooperation. We forget about the victim and how much we need them.
And
So,
thank you so much for saying that, because I had a experience, and so I'm going to put you on the spot here. And of course, any question that you don't want to ask, just say, I think I'll bypass on that one, because
yeah.
audience, they didn't know I'm asking these questions, so they're being put on the spot. I actually had to go through the court system during one of my cases, and it was one of the scariest times of my life because I had no clue of what to expect.
Right.
I didn't even know that there was a such thing during that time of a victim's advocate who could be there with you, or someone
Yeah.
maybe who could walk you through the process. But one of the things that threw me off guard is I wasn't allowed to testify
Mm-hmm.
because I was told, oh, the prosecutors will eat you alive based on the findings and et cetera and et cetera. It was a date rape case that I
Right.
was involved with. Is that true that they can make it to where the victim cannot testify? Because how does that person really get to know what the person did if
Right.
their rights are being stripped to testify about what happened?
So was the case concluded with like a plea bargain or something? Was there something?
No, ma'am. Now, I don't mind telling you about the case at all.
Yeah.
This particular case involved 4 different women that this gentleman had assaulted, had raped.
Uh-huh.
And because mine was a date rape, the other ones was classified as something else. One involved a kidnapping, but they were all around the same time, like
Right.
within 2 days of each other. With mines, I willingly went to the house of this person at 1:30 in the morning
Right.
because he was an ex-boyfriend, but we were still
Right.
friends at the time. I worked with his sister. So that was the reason they were saying they would eat me alive, is because they would wear me out saying, well, what were you doing at 1:30 in the morning? We were going
So
to go
his
watch
stuff
TV and play
was,
dominoes. And my sisters and sister-in-law
I
went with me.
understand. So his stuff was handled, his criminal stuff was handled with other victims' testimony. They didn't use yours. That's what you're
Right,
saying? Okay.
right.
Yeah. And so I guess the best way to answer that question is to look at what the goal of each person in the system is. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So like prosecutors, for example, okay, they are trying to ensure that justice is done.
Right.
They want to make sure that if there is an offender, that offender is held accountable.
Right.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it doesn't always match up. A prosecutor's goal doesn't always match up with what a victim's needs are. Okay. So whereas a victim's need closure, testimony, to be able to come up and say, I was a part of this situation, and I want to make sure that he knows that I'm sitting in this seat and sitting here to testify against him for what he did and it was wrong. Whereas that is a perfectly valid need that a victim might have. There is the possibility, and of course I would have to know particulars about stuff.
Yes, of course.
But there is a possibility that in the long run, that might hurt the prosecutor's quest for justice, if that makes sense.
Yes,
And
yes,
so
that
they
makes
might
sense.
feel like this is something that I would have a better chance at getting this person a conviction on a stronger crime, a longer sentence, whatever it is, with these elements right here, but not this element right here.
Yes, yes. No,
And
that
so,
makes perfect sense. It's always stuck with me. And
yeah,
so, if I'm going to help someone out in the honest, I want
yeah,
to be able to help them all the way, even
yeah,
by personal accounts, because I was subpoenaed to go to court, but then I was never even allowed in the courtroom. So it's
yeah,
kind of like, what's the point then?
yeah,
And for me, when everything was over with, he got 25 years to life, and he was out in 9 years, even though he was considered a high risk sex
right,
offender. And so for me, that was just a slap in the face, because I
right,
felt like, had every woman been able to testify against him, regardless of
right,
how small or how large the injuries were, because
right.
it was still an injury, it would have perhaps been able to keep him behind bars longer.
which is why victims feel secondary victimization throughout the system. I mean, that's that kind of stuff. And that is just a small example. Like that right there is just a couple of ways, that there's things like that all along the way that discount the participation and cooperation of victims throughout the system. And what it does is no matter what happens with the offender, it affects the healing process of the crime victim, and so simply having somebody to advocate for and explain to some of that process, I think it's a huge help, just like when, if I'm taken off guard by something,
Right. Yes.
that's going to affect me differently than if somebody has prepared me and told me what to expect.
100%.
So that's what we are, we're trying to make sure for any victim that we are dealing with. And I think that's the goal. That should be the goal for everybody. Make sure they know what's going on. Make sure people know what's going on. Because if they don't know what's going on and they're taken off guard and they're surprised about everything, then it affects their healing process in the future. They have long-term effects that they don't have to deal with if they're able to get what they need from the criminal justice system. And I think that's where people don't understand is that getting what you need from the criminal justice system doesn't always mean 1,000,000 years under the jail. Okay.
Correct.
That means other stuff to victims.
Right. And for me, it meant other stuff than him just going to jail. It meant some type of closure.
Yes, you being able to testify and all of that stuff. That's so that a lot of times those things don't meet together. But I think that being able to inform victims of their rights and keeping them cooperative with the system and all of that stuff is a wonderful tool in making those things merge a little more.
100%. And I tell you what, so much of what I've done in my life has been centered around some of the abuse that I encountered, and so to close out on that one, I actually went to go and get my paralegal certificate because I said I would never, ever be caught off guard again, not knowing what the criminal justice system entails. And so that has helped me a lot, even to help the victims that I support and survivors by saying, yes, but I know what it's going to be like when you go there, and I'll go there with you. I'll find somebody to help you because I didn't have that. Now, this was many years ago, that this happened, and you would hope that things have positively changed, such as being able to have a victim's advocate now has been a great thing. And so thank you so much, because that helped me even now, you don't even know it. So we're going to keep moving forward so I don't like fool over here. But so victims impact statement. I've actually helped several victims write the victims impact statement, but in different counties, the judges have to give approval for those victims impact statement to be read openly in court. Is that the way it works in Jefferson County?
So we kind of have two different types of victim impact statements. One, you've got that written down victim impact statement that gets sent out upon an indictment. We do that here in the county. Upon an indictment, you get a written victim impact statement. And then and that written victim impact statement is such an important tool. If people get that, please fill it out. Please send it back to the district attorney's office. That victim impact statement follows that offender everywhere. For the rest of their lives, anytime they're involved in anything, and they don't get to see it. The defense doesn't get to see it. It's confidential. The only people that get to see it are the people that are involved in, like judges get to see it, prosecutors, anybody who's, parole board, all of that stuff, all get to see it. The other portion of it, like the verbal victim impact statement, like a victim allocution. Our judges in Jefferson County, there's not really approval or not approval. At the end of a case, they say, do you have a victim who wants to do an allocation? And they absolutely have the right. And our judges are very open and lenient with who is allowed. They want to make sure, they go by law, of course, they let the victim, but if it's appropriate, victim's family, if they need to get up there and say something, if they need people, if they need to get somebody wants to come up there and read something
on their behalf,
they let them do that. They don't really put time frames on them. They like them to be reasonable. They like them to be respectful of the court and all of that stuff. They keep things inside. It's not a free for all, but they are very understanding about the need for that final portion and how important it is to crime victims.
Because that's healing in itself. That's so much healing.
I've never had any problem with any judge in Jefferson County allowing what a victim or their family needs for an allocution.
And I do know that there's some rules, like they don't want you attacking the offender, saying, I'm going to kill
Yeah,
you because you did this to me. There are some
right,
rules that's involved with that.
right.
But I feel like if it's a well written, piece,
Hmm.
that there should
Right,
be no reason why you shouldn't be able to address the courts and say, this is
right.
how I was harmed by this particular situation. And
Absolutely.
so
And
I'm,
the
I'm
judges in this county agree with that.
thank
For
you.
sure.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. I'm glad I came back to Texas. Okay. So case status information. What is that? Case status information. What does that mean?
Oh, that's mainly just updates, like part of the victims' rights notifications, they need to have updates on what's going on. So whenever we know what's going on, that's where sometimes things fall through the cracks. We don't always know. Sometimes prosecutors don't know. Victims have a right to be informed and they request to be informed, but then sometimes a prosecutor thinks they have something on a docket and then they get there and it's, the defense attorney has requested a reset or something like that. They are not always knowledgeable of what's going on. So we certainly don't always know. So it's a constant battle of trying to, make sure we stay on top of cases for crime victims. That's why we encourage crime victims, and a lot of times they're like, oh, I don't want to call and bug them and all that stuff. I'll go on record. I'm on video right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You are
Yes.
not going to bug our office calling up here and asking questions about your case. Okay. You
Right.
want to call every day and say, is that person in jail or when's their case set? Because we don't want you to miss anything either. That's the whole point. We want you to stay involved. That's our biggest, our biggest, goal, is for you to be encouraged and be involved. So
Right.
call and ask whenever you've got questions and whenever you've got
Yes.
needs. We're not in court like prosecutors are all the
Mhm,
time. We're
mhm,
easy to get in touch with,
mhm.
call and
Yes.
ask.
Well, speaking of cases, and this is kind of not about case status information, but it's about cases in general. I know that you've served as an expert witness before in court for different cases, and I always do my research when I'm going to interview someone because I want to know a little bit about their
Yeah,
background and what they've been doing. And this particular case caught my attention because it was a woman who was convicted of assaulting another woman. It was the first
right,
time in Jefferson County. How would you say that our system has changed over the years since you've kind of been in and out of here for quite some time? You're probably
right.
knowledgeable to where there's not that stigma that, oh, if it's a woman, you're not going to get
Yeah,
convicted. Or if it's a man, you're not going to
right.
get convicted. So just don't even worry about, trying to get that case heard. Do you feel like that the justice system has improved in saying victim rights for all? It doesn't matter. It can
Yes.
happen always.
I feel like the justice system has improved.
Mhm.
And then taking that one step further, I feel like Jefferson County has kept up with that because
Good.
there's a combination of things that have to happen. Legislation has to do its job.
Exactly.
But then you've got, counties have to stay caught up with that. And
Right.
they have to say, even that is a law and we are willing to pursue it the way it's supposed to be pursued. And
Yes.
that is, there's been all kinds of times in Jefferson County where we have been one of the first places to deal with a certain type of case or
Yes.
to have, way back in the day, we were one of the first agencies like ours. We had one of the first agencies for child advocacy, like Garth House. I mean,
Yes. Yes.
Jefferson County has officials that try to stay on top um of legislative changes and making sure that they have people that are keeping up with all that stuff. So
That
yeah,
is
I feel
very
like
encouraging to
it's
hear
changed.
because, even with, say child support cases, there
Yeah,
was always a big stigma. And now I say it's more of a myth instead of a stigma to where, if a father goes to try to get custody of the kids, oh, don't you even worry about it because the judges are always going to be for the mom. And for
right,
years, I do think that it played out pretty much like that no matter
right,
how bad the mom was and no matter how good the father would not get custody. And I'm
right,
so happy to see that those type of things have changed to really support the person who needs to be supported. And
right,
so in this case, with a woman versus a woman and that woman being convicted, it gave me some sense of relief of saying that, hey, it doesn't matter who, what, when, how it's being done.
right.
If you're out there sexually assaulting someone,
Mhm.
you will get caught and you will
Yeah,
be convicted. And so
yeah,
good job, Jefferson County, for following up with the legislators, knowing what they are, and then
yeah,
carrying it through for that
yeah,
Pacific County.
yeah.
So courtroom familiarization and accompaniment for criminal court, is that long-term, basically just victim advocates being in court, or does that mean something else?
Just, no, it's just making sure that if they are going to have to be in court and they want an advocate, they've got somebody with them, and making sure that they are in fact prepared for, like particularly with young people,
Yes.
if they have to go to court and testify, they've never seen the inside of a courtroom, never even, and they don't watch courtroom dramas and stuff like that,
Right.
like sometimes adults do.
Yes.
So going over and doing some familiarization, like saying, hey, this is where the judge is going to sit, this is where the jury is going to be. this is where you're going to sit. This is where,
Yeah.
you know, all that kind of stuff.
And
Just
I
making
could
sure.
imagine a small child being swallowed up in that big chair. Like,
Yeah.
it would be so intimidating for an
Yeah.
adult, much less
Yeah.
a child that has to sit there in front of
Yeah.
all these adults in this big, huge, chair, which they
Yeah.
have to be seen by everyone. And so
Yeah.
I understand it, but I would just have been
And
terrified.
and
So,
like you mentioned, you know, I've sat up in that chair as an expert witness, but I've never sat up in that chair as a victim, you know,
okay.
and that's a complete, and it's intimidating to sit up there as a witness. It's,
Yes,
you know, you're sitting up there
yes,
and everything feels very serious and very overwhelming.
yes,
And so sitting up there, you know, as a victim of crime, talking about what could very well be one of the most difficult experiences in your life that you've ever had up to this point.
yes.
Um, it's a lot.
It
So
is a whole
I feel
lot.
like victims, if I feel like if that's the expectation that we have for crime victims, then we owe them every bit of everything that they have a right
Yes,
to
ma'am. Yes,
ensure
ma'am.
that they have all the empowerment that they need to stay involved.
For sure, 100%. Protective order proceeding. What does that mean?
So protective orders, that's when we kind of get back to a little bit of our domestic violence roots. We are an agency that does protective orders free of charge in Jefferson County. Protective orders are stay away orders specifically for victims of family violence. I
Okay,
could
so that
talk
would
for
never be
really.
specific to sexual assault
And it's
victims.
sexual assault as well. And a lot of times, you know, with because that's kind of how it progressed. You know, it starts with domestic violence, but then over the years, protective orders moved to date violence, sexual assault, everything. Um, a lot of times what we try to do with sexual assault cases, particularly, is if we can get like things like bond conditions or things like that through the criminal judge, we're trying to do everything, you know.
Very good.
But particularly protective orders are probably most well known in Jefferson County for domestic violence cases.
Thank you. And then it also mentioned post-conviction services. Tell me a little bit about what that means.
So once somebody has been convicted of a crime, depending on, you know, there's gonna be some kind of a sentence. You know, they're gonna go to jail, they're gonna get probation, they're gonna go to prison, they're gonna have parole. There's things that a victim needs to stay informed of, you know, what their probation requirements are. Okay, because if they violate those, then somebody needs to know. And sometimes when they violate those, the victim knows. Same thing with you know, parole. You know, if they're going to be going to prison and they're coming up for parole, victims need to know when that is. They need to be able to say, hey, you know, I want to make sure that my victim impact is in there for the parole board so they know what it was, the impact that this crime had on me and why this person needs to stay in jail for longer or whatever. There's all kinds of rights that they have post conviction. So we just try to keep them on track with, you know, depending on what the sentence was, what they need to be informed of.
So during the time and I'm gonna stick with just the case that I was originally talking
Uh-huh.
about. I won't talk about the other cases. I went through the Texas Department of Criminal Justice System, and I was notified every time that
Yeah.
person came up for parole. I was able to actually write a letter in to say I don't
Yeah.
think that he should be released. And I did write many letters, and one of the reasons was because he basically told the courts right there, which is another reason why I was upset that they didn't let me testify. I heard this through someone else who was in the court that he had threatened to kill me because I had lied on him. And that if he ever got out, he would come back and he would kill me.
Right.
And so I, told them like it was there. It's on record. I'm sure it's on
Yeah.
record. And I don't want him to get out because I'm
Right.
afraid. I know
Right.
he has to say where he's gonna live and etc. But that just wasn't enough for me. And so I at
Right.
least took some comfort in knowing that I, as a victim, had a say in what
Mhm.
his next steps was
Right.
going to be.
See,
And
and
so
that's a real important transition. Is safety planning on that list you're about to ask me about stuff?
I was, so go ahead.
Okay, because that's kind of that brings me right to safety planning because you know when we're talking about you know what you're saying, you know, even if that person, you know, so that person was sentenced 25 to life, you know, let's say that they even did 25, let's say he did 25, regardless, at some point people are going to get out of jail, right?
Right.
At some point people might not ever go to jail, you know, they might get
Correct.
probation or something like that and jail isn't an option. So safety planning is about planning um for that person to be free and clear. Okay. And that victim needing to know, you know, what they need to do, how they need to proceed, if they need protective orders, if they need simply like, you know, ways to, you know, if they need to move, they need to relocate, they need protection like that. if they need to change up routines and plans and stuff like that, like those are things, ways that make it easy on people to stalk, commit further crimes. We want to be people, that aren't targets for that kind of stuff. So in safety planning, it's about, because, I would love nothing more than to, if it's appropriate, if somebody's at risk, let's just, put them behind bars so that they're not a risk to me anymore.
Right.
But I know that that's not reality. I know
Correct.
that at some point people are going to be at risk. And so
Right.
that's what safety planning is about, trying to, in every way that we can, every aspect of their life, reduce that risk as much
Yes.
as.
And that's a really good thing because even with this gentleman, he was on probation when he committed these further acts of
Yeah,
crime. And so again, since he was on probation for that, I thought he's already on probation. None of us knew that he was
right.
already a sex offender. Now he's offended four other people, and you're telling me he gets 25 years? Like, are you
Yeah,
serious? Because we know
yeah,
if he gets in there and exemplifies good behavior, he can be out a lot sooner than that.
right.
And so we all pretty much knew that he was not going to be in there 25
Yeah.
years. So he and I followed him even after the case was over, even after he was released, because I'll be honest, I lived in fear for a long time.
Mhm.
And he did get picked up. And again, he got minimal sentence and he was back out. And so I wish that our
Yeah.
justice system would do a little more
Yeah.
for repeat offenders because chances are that they're never going to do it again just isn't the case at all.
And I think that that's the way legislation has gone over the last several years. I think there have been a lot of enhancements for continuous crimes,
Yes,
and things where people have prior convictions and stuff when they're habitual,
yes,
offenders of certain crimes. I think the legislation has begun to realize that, that if people are habitual, if this is continued, then it's not gonna ever stop. They're not gonna stop. So we have
correct.
to stick them with something, that those are people that might have to go to jail and just not have the opportunity to get out.
Very, very, very
So,
much so. So
yeah.
I'm almost going to wrap up. And first off, let me tell you, thank you so much because the
Yeah.
information you've given, even now for me, who a person that have been through some of that, has been extremely valuable. And so if someone wanted to come and volunteer as a victim's advocate, or they wanted to come and work with you guys to help in your efforts, or even, just in any capacity, who would they contact to be able to assist? Because I'm really big on making sure that you all also get the support that you need
Yeah.
to continue to
Yeah.
support others.
Really, if they just called over here to the agency and said that they wanted to volunteer, we have a volunteer coordinator here, but also everybody kind of deals with, we have a small staff. We have 5 people,
Okay.
including me. And so there's not really a shuffle where people get lost. So if,
Oh, okay.
yeah, like we pretty much know we know a lot of each other's clients that we're dealing with, and sometimes, we'll cross up and, deal with the same people and all that stuff. So, same thing with volunteers. If somebody calls in here and says they need something, we'll get it handled. So.
Very, very good. So I was going to start this off, and typically I'll start off my interview saying, what is this company's or corporation's or nonprofit mission statement? On this one, I looked it up because I have a question for you after I read it. So I'm going to read it verbatim so I don't skip a beat.
Okay.
Jefferson County elected officials and employees will carry out our duties while respecting citizens and business entities by maintaining fiscal responsibility, demonstrating accountability, and allocating resources in a fair and equitable manner. So the question I have for you is, do you feel as an employee of Jefferson County that you can carry out this mission in your daily work with Jefferson County?
Absolutely. I mean, I think nothing I deal with at the county, whether administratively or otherwise, hinders any of that. I have nothing but, and our goal at Victims Assistance specifically is to ensure that crime victims get the services that they need. That's our mission statement is to ensure that any losses that a victim experienced, whether it's financially, emotionally, loss of life, any of that kind of stuff, whatever burdens a crime victim has, that we can help move them through the process and lessen that burden. That's our goal. And so I get no negative interaction with anybody in the county that's trying to do the opposite of what I'm trying to do. Even when, I'm dealing with my prosecutors at the DA's office and the victim's goals and the prosecutor's goals don't meet eye to eye. If I have a victim's participation and cooperation, we are going to try to go tandem. We're try to parallel each other hand in
Yes,
hand as
yes,
far as we can, even if we have to branch off at some point because there's something that doesn't match up. in general, we're going to go hand in hand to the end. So,
Well, you have such a big heart and such a beautiful spirit, by the way. And so I have no doubt that you were following that mission. But, so many times I see a mission statement out there and then I interview or I talk to someone and I'm thinking, they may need to go back. They need to go back and read that mission statement so they can start
yeah,
lining up with what it says. And so
yeah,
thank you so much. Please thank your staff for me as well. And if you don't mind, sit around and chat with me for a little bit. I would love to catch up with you a little bit more.
absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, dear.